tried.
Okay, what is that one? I will now call the regular session of the Blue Springs City Council meeting as March 18th, 2024. Would you stand with me and observe a moment of silence? And I'll lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance, but before we do that, our thoughts and prayers go out to Councilmember Jerry Kaler, who's not with us tonight because he lost his mom this afternoon. So you might give some thought to that in the moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. I want to welcome you in attendance as well as those that might watch on social media at a later time. Next, we have the consent. Well, let's do a confirmation of a quorum.
Councilmember Levisay.
Here.
Fowler.
Here.
Erickson.
Here.
Edmondson.
Here.
Culpepper. Present. Councilmember Kaler is absent. Mayor Ross.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, next we have a consent agenda. Unless there are items that need to be pulled, I accept a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Levisay.
Aye.
Fowler.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Edmondson.
Aye.
Culpepper.
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Carried unanimously.
Next, I'll accept the motion to continue to the March. It was continued tonight to be continued until April 1st, 2024 City Council meeting on the House Bill 5194, 5195 for Hoot Owl Meadows rezoning and general development.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, the public hearing on Shepherd Road is continued indefinitely. And so I don't think we need a motion for that. Next, we have a presentation of the Google Fiber expansion.
Good evening, Council. My name is Rachel Merlo. I'm the Head of Government and Community Affairs for Google Fiber in Kansas City. Do you require an address for your record?
Right?
No? Okay.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so Google Fiber has been meeting with your city staff for a few months now to explore the expansion of our network to the city of Blue Springs. We've been serving customers in the Kansas City area since 2012 and have slowly been building our way around the metro. What we are hoping to do this evening is to have the license agreement approved, which will then put our team in a position to start the design, the engineering work, and eventually the construction and begin providing services, our internet services here in Blue Springs. What we would propose is that the construction work would likely begin in the second quarter of 2025. For a city the size of Blue Springs, what we would be looking at is about a 2-year build out, done very closely with your city's public works team, who we've had the opportunity to talk with about our construction methods. What the process would look like for your residents as we undertake this would be construction within the right-of-way. This is going to be on the front easement of homes, and everything is done underground. Every now and then there might be an instance where we need to go aerial, where we need to attach to a pole. Perhaps there's a railroad crossing, or some body of water, or maybe there's an unknown rocky territory that we might come into. But typically it's all going to be underground. There would be a vault that is flush mount to the ground, nothing above grade. Those are placed usually every other household, and that's what houses electronics that allows us to connect folks who choose to sign up for our services. And in that process, we have the responsibility to manage our crews, make sure they are providing resident notification. We typically do 72 hours in advance with what we call a lawn dart. So if you're familiar with perhaps a lawn service, for example, when they've come, or maybe the bug spray person, when they come to your yard and they leave that little sign in the yard that tells you they've been there, that's what we do in advance. There's a phone number there that says, please call Google Fiber if you have any questions. Thank you, Christine. I emailed that photo to her to give you an idea of some of what the vaults look like when they're installed. This is in Nebraska, but it would be the same thing here in Blue Springs. This is what we've just used across the metro here as well. That advanced resident notification directs folks to a phone number that we manage 24/7. We really try to urge people to contact us and not the city if they have questions or concerns or complaints about how things have gone, to make sure they understand who's in their yard, why we're there, and if things aren't restored to their expectation, we want to know about it. This allows us to open the ticket, assign it to the vendor who needs to be the person responsible for addressing any of those concerns, and make sure that we can close it out. In terms of the services, Google Fiber is a little bit different than other providers you might have in the community. We are internet only, and it's a completely fiber network. So if you're not familiar with fiber, it's made out of strands of glass about the size of a piece of hair, and that's what allows information to move much more quickly than it's able to with a traditional copper connection. What we have had in our product lineup since 2012 is a gigabit service, so 1,000 megabits symmetric for $70 a month. The price is still $70 a month 12 years later. But now we also have 2 gig, 5 gig. We've recently launched 8 gig here in Kansas City. So as people start demanding more of their internet, we make sure that we're able to meet those needs and expectations and even go beyond that for how we think the way the web is going. We do not have a television service, so that looks different than others are used to. We encourage our subscribers to look at the many streaming options that are available to them, and some of those are even available in the buy flow. So if you were to sign up for our service, you might see some options there of something that would work for you if you like to watch television. The service, as I said, with that build out beginning in Q2 of 2025, usually it's a few months later that we would see the first subscribers, first households able to sign up for service. We release addresses as they become available. So we don't have to build out the entire city before we start offering services. With that, I'm happy to take your questions. I'm sure there are a few.
Well, I have a question and comments.
Okay.
Have you been with Google Fiber from?
I was employee 1 in Kansas City.
Okay.
Yes.
I remember people were excited about Google Fiber, and I received calls, and I'm sure the council members received calls, as when are we going to get it?
Mm-hmm.
So we reached out on a number of occasions, and Google Fiber said, well, first I think Google Fiber ignored us and didn't even respond back to us. But eventually, you weren't ready to come to Blue Springs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, certainly I talked to people in Kansas City as you started to locate in Kansas City. There were some hiccups, as you're well aware. Some within my own family that their yard was plowed up and it took forever to get it put back into place. And I'm certain that you all have perfected that system but now, to where we won't get the complaints when you go get ready to install it here in Blue Springs. Is that a good, correct statement?
I cannot assure you there will be 0 complaints in a construction project. In fact, there are probably going to be people who are disturbed, who are inconvenienced, and maybe don't think things are done according to their expectations. But that's why we want to hear about it. And the way that we have managed our project today is there's a local team who works for Google Fiber overseeing those contractors doing the build. They go out, they do the construction. There's another company that goes behind them for quality control. Separately, we're meeting regularly in most of these projects. We start weekly, typically with public works teams, and we say, here's where we are in the city today, and they're able to say, yep, this looks good, or if they've heard something at City Hall that isn't going well and we need to move quickly on it, we keep those open lines of communication with your city staff team. So no, I can't promise you there aren't going to be complaints, that everything is going to go beautifully. But what I can assure you is that for us, that customer relationship starts at construction, and we want to make sure we get it right.
Yeah, and I guess the key to it is if we do have concerns, that you're gonna respond to it, not ignore it.
Correct.
Okay, anybody else? Who
Go
wants to go
ahead, down
first?
there.
Go
All right, yeah, I appreciate Google starting to work here with Blue Springs, and I know our businesses and citizens will have been wanting the service for a while, so thanks for bringing the service to us ultimately here in 2025. And I guess I would say let's really use good communications on when you get in people's yards, because there is, we've seen that in the last few years, different company, but there was a lot of problems. And I see the challenge, that if there's 11 feet to work with in the easement, and if a company puts it 10 feet back in the easement, well, they're gonna be going over the easement into people's yards and damaging that. And I think that's where I saw the most complaints, is that, stay within the easement. We understand it's gonna be disrupted, but also respect the easement too, and just stay within it, so.
Councilman Levacy, then we'll go down on this side.
Well, I just want to address some of the things, because I had got a lot of those resident complaints as well with the previous competition. And unfortunately for you guys, we're coming just off the heels of a couple of years of some really bad work being done. I even know I personally had them bore through my sewer line, and that was a couple $1,000 and a pretty big pain in the butt to get it done. And that's me as a council member that was dealing with that. So the average resident, I think, has some similar concerns. So we were talking with staff about maybe an escrow account, something that if things weren't done satisfactory, I understand that's not allowed in our code. Also, maybe if this work could be done in the back easement, not the front easement. So if you could maybe address why you do the front easement, and whether it could even be done another way. And just in general, I know you can't guarantee or assure there aren't going to be problems, but can you talk more about the construction process, your quality control, what that looks like, and why you think that should give us enough confidence to contract with you to do this work?
We can certainly sympathize where you're coming from, that sometimes there's some construction fatigue. We're seeing it more and more in cities as broadband expansion and advancement and investment in networks is growing. So what you're experiencing is something we're seeing quite a bit more of than the days when we were the only people doing fiber. To the first question as to why the front easement, a few reasons that work well. We don't have to go into people's backyards, get around gates, get around pets, get around swing sets. It's a less disruptive experience, frankly, for the resident in that capacity. We don't have it's a faster approach. It allows us to go in a much more clean, efficient build model than when we're trying to get in and out of yards and around fences and that kind of thing that you would experience in the rear easement. Sometimes in cities too, when other utilities who do have that public utility easement located in the rear, those tend to get a little bit crowded. And also for us, we do want to go underground. It protects our network. So here in a community in the Midwest where we see all the weather, in parts of our network that are attached to poles, they're more vulnerable to outages. So this allows us to keep things a better experience for the user, and frankly also protecting our investment too when it's underground like that. From the construction experience point, it is going to be underground. You'll see some machinery that's going to kind of bore through the ground and pull the conduit through. Then the fiber comes through. And that's what those vaults are for. So they're able to put electronics in there. We don't actually go in and attach to a residence or to a small business, to the building itself, unless they sign up for our service. So we'll pass through the community, and it's not unless and until somebody were to go to our website, sign up, and say they want service, that's when we would actually do the attachment from the street to the address, so to the home or to the business. And at that point, it looks pretty similar to probably what you've seen from others, with some kind of a small box on the outside of the house and then something on the inside as well when the installation happens.
Down here? Councilmember Colbert.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. You said one of these lovely boxes would have to be in every other yard.
And every
Is that
other yard
correct?
in the front easement, yes, within the right of way.
What do you do about the sprinkler systems?
If
are
you
everywhere.
discover that we have hit a sprinkler system, you tell us and we get it repaired. But sometimes those are just really hard to locate, those irrigation systems. So you're going to find gas, water, electric, other cable utilities are going to be located before we do construction. Those irrigation systems really don't pop up and say when you're going to call the typical locator number. Some households know where their lines are and they mark them for us. And they say, yeah, I know I've got a sprinkler line here. And so that is really helpful for us to know in advance so we can make sure we avoid it. But that does happen. And sometimes if we're doing construction in the winter months, the homeowner maybe doesn't discover it until now when it's springtime and they go to turn it on again. They call us up and they, yep, that was our work in that part of the year. We'll get it taken care of.
So each person on a block or in a section of town will get a notification that we're going to be here next week?
So it'll
how
say
that
Google
works?
Fiber is coming. We're working with your city to deploy the network. If you have any questions or if your expectations are not met when it comes to restoration, here's the 24/7 phone number to call.
Good, because we get them all.
I understand that. So I am here as well. We do have a local team, and so we're, hopefully going to be fielding those, and Tom will become intimately familiar with us and our crew leads.
Councilmember, just come on down the line, Councilmember.
Okay.
Edmondson.
So I guess my concern is when it's every other, you get a vault. Since the last person that came through and did their boring and stuff, I have one of those vaults. Do you cohabitat in a vault, or am I gonna end up with two vaults in my front yard?
I don't know that it would be exactly at your house. We haven't, but no, we do not co-locate facilities with other providers.
Okay. Then my second question would be, in our resolution, it states that we're granting a 20-year non-exclusive license for you to install this. Is it really gonna take 20 years to get this done?
No, construction should start in the second quarter of 2025, and for a city the size of Blue Springs, we anticipate the build-out should take about 2 years.
Okay.
There's weather, or if the city wants us to move at a slower pace, faster pace, those kinds of things always can impact the build schedule. But it should be about 2 years.
Okay.
Councilmember Erickson.
Well, I think you answered almost all the questions I had, but I just want to make one comment in defense of the past contractor. We did have 2020 and 2021, so there were some issues with that. The vault, multi-use vault, I wanted to know about that. You answered the time frame, but there are some areas in town that it appears to me, not being a contractor, that the rear of the yard would be easier, less destructive or disruptive, however you look at it. Is there any consideration for, let's say, one chunk of a subdivision or 4 blocks looks better for the backyard? Would you consider that, or is it always going to be in the front yard?
It's typically going to be in the front.
Okay.
Unless, like I said, in those rare instances where we might need to be on a pole. But I think for the most part, it is going to be front easement within the right of way.
Just because of the boundaries and the distances between?
That's just what our construction methodology has looked like. Also, depending on, I guess it could be the rear utility easement, where sometimes other providers, by virtue of providing telephone service, are considered a utility and we are not. And so we don't always have privileges to use a rear
Okay.
easement sometimes.
Anyone else? Councilmember Levinson.
I'm going to clarify that same thing. So are you aware of any cities that do require you to use rear easements?
Not within this metro.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay, is there a motion to approve resolution number 21-2024, approving a non-exclusive lease agreement between the city and Google Fiber Missouri for installation of network facilities?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Next, we have a presentation of the downtown master plan.
Mayor, the city has one exhibit to enter into the record, City Council Information Form dated February 12, 2024, with the following attachments: affidavit of publication in the Examiner on March 2nd, 2024, Presentation Downtown Master Plan, letter from School of Economics, and resolution with City of Blue Springs Downtown Master Plan attached as Exhibit A. This is all we have to enter for the record.
Okay, staff.
Yes. Kara Elbert, 903 West Main Street, on behalf of the city, and I have been sworn in. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Before you this evening is the City of Blue Springs Downtown Master Plan for your review and approval. First, I want to thank everyone on the council as well as the larger Blue Springs community who have participated in a variety of open houses, stakeholder meetings, and provided meaningful feedback throughout the planning process, which started back in September of 2023. The Downtown Master Plan is a product of an extensive planning process that included considerable community involvement and city resources. The Downtown Master Plan is a guiding document for the redevelopment of downtown Blue Springs. It provides a vision supported by community leaders, stakeholders, and interested parties. It represents a vision for the redevelopment of downtown Blue Springs, which illustrates a thriving center of activity for the community. The city put out an RFP for planning services in May of 2023 to engage a consultant to prepare an update to the city's previous downtown master plan. Due to the previous plan's goals being accomplished and conditions having changed, making it the right time to pivot and look at new possibilities for redevelopment within downtown. The plan itself is broken into several sections such as the purpose, the planning process, overall program agenda, area concepts, strategies, and implementation. The planning area was identified of the larger downtown area, not just Main Street. For planning purposes, the downtown area was bound by 7 Highway on the east, 15th Street on the west, 40 Highway on the south, and R.D. Mize on the north. It looked at 5 areas within the downtown, including the railside area, the yard area, the core area, Central Park area, and East Main area, and looked at identifying challenges, solutions, and next steps. With me this evening is Corey Scott. Corey Scott, Senior Partner with RDG Planning and Design, to continue the presentation, and staff will be available for any questions you may have at the conclusion of the presentation. Do you want to stay here? Okay. Do you want me to flip this for you, or you just want to?
Oh, I got it. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Hi, Corey Scott with
This is a
RDG.
public hearing, you need to be sworn in.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Corey Scott, RDG Planning and Design, 301 Grand Avenue in Des Moines, Iowa. This has been a very fun project for us. When we're looking at downtowns and comparing communities to communities, it's like there's so many places that want to have a coffee shop. You've got multiple coffee shops. So many places that want to have a restaurant that's really nice. You've got multiple restaurants. We want places where we can live, places where we can shop, places where we can have medical services, financial services. You have that. So you're at a great point in time where you can look at the momentum and really build off of that and leverage that. I want to share a little bit about the process to begin with. So we kicked off in September, had the draft done earlier this year, went through some edits, but along the way we had a number of opportunities where we can visit with people. So really appreciate everybody who came out to meetings. We had about 150 folks, that some of them repeats, that came to our events, and well over 600 folks that participated online. So we just got a tremendous amount of input, and by no means was that something that was easy to do, and really appreciate staff and their help with that. So Kara was mentioning how we looked at a number of different areas, and this diagram just shows the downtown core, which is most folks would identify as west of 10th Street on Main, but there's really a number of other areas that could be attached and linked to a much bigger image of downtown, and particularly the area that we call the lumberyard, or in this case the yard, and then also the rail side, but also looking all the way east to 7 Highway. So thinking about all these connections, and when we take even a tighter look, looking at the building footprints, these are really for illustration to kind of imagine what these sites could look like and how they could be assembled, not to be literal site plans of how they would be developed. So we will break it down into the rail side area, the yard area, the core, East Main, and then we'll look at Central Park in the neighborhood. I think I have to scroll a little bit on this. So on this particular one, we have This is the railside area, and so this is north of Main to 15th Street. And so we have a number of existing facilities here, thinking about reuse and repurpose as a first option, and then thinking about how we can also frame Main Street with development. Understanding that there is a rail there, thinking about a buffer being something that's more like parking, and then further up on 15th Street, thinking about that being more multifamily, perhaps townhomes or even apartments, but thinking about the relationship just to the west of the street. Inside the area, we can also see a possible either reuse of the School of Economics, but something that was very popular was a new farmer's market and a facility for that. And then in the document itself, we have a number of different massing diagrams just to show how all the pieces come together. So again, framing 15th Street and also making 14th Street something that can be a north-south route to the yard area. But in a lot of these cases, you're seeing about 3 to 4 story buildings in all of these. This is really going to be dependent on what the developer proposes. But for the purposes of seeing redevelopment along Main, you wanted to make sure that it's a number of stories so you can frame the street. Number of different angles of what that could look like. And again, the townhomes could be a higher intensity use than what's shown there. Something to also note that I didn't necessarily point out is that there is a proposed trail that would connect this development to the south and all the way over to the high school and all the grounds there. Just to the south of it, this is the area that is east of 14th Street, which the city is, now it's a clear site, but thinking about a number of different options for this area. And again, looking at Main Street, trying to frame that street so when you're arriving to downtown from the west, it feels like you've already arrived at downtown rather than being in the core area. With that 14th Street being framed and the south side really being more of a multi-family development, could be 3, could be 4 stories tall. We're also looking at some performance to kind of see where is the sweet spot for some of this. There is the maintenance facility right now. We're showing a development project on that site, but it could also remain parking. You could see where the market may influence some of the properties nearby. We're just west of 14th Street. We've got a number of single-family conversions that are hosting a number of different units, but those could eventually transition over time. So we see the yard site as one of those higher priority projects that just because the city is now the owner of the property, that might move forward a little bit on a sooner schedule. A number of different diagrams of what that could look like. This is looking north. In this particular one, it's 4 stories, but it might be 3 stories. 5 stories seems a little too tall, but it could be up to that. Being nimble in the future is something that you'd like to see. And then this is also looking southwest. Again, framing the street with mixed-use development is one of the desired components of it. And then if you're thinking about the streetscape, eventually it could be from City Hall west to connecting into all this development project to help it become a catalyst site. We can revisit any of these areas that you'd like to talk about. Then we got Main from 11th and 12th. That is typically the perceived core area. We'll talk a little bit later about possibility of rebuilding the street because of some of the ADA issues. But seeing on either side of the development project, of the Main Street core, thinking about parking and how that can service some of the future businesses that are there, but also perhaps maybe how can we leverage it for some possible development. The north side could be all parking, but also seeing it being a private project that could have development would be nice. Just east of 11th Street, seeing this as being multifamily development that is supporting the downtown core. What happens first? Do you bring the people? Do you bring the businesses? Both are together, and so that is just something that will have to be worked out. One thing that you're not seeing on this particular area is just east of this facility that we have is in the document you can see that we're proposing additional parking to support just the businesses, but also some of the civic activities that happen in this facility. Number of different diagrams of what that might look like. Trying to focus more of the color onto the areas that could potentially change. Try to match it as best as possible to some of the drone photography that we took as well. One thing that we're seeing in a number of communities when doing a streetscape project, if that's something that rises to the top as far as things to do, is thinking about how that interruption could be offset with additional parking. And so we've seen communities like Wapaka, Wisconsin focus on doing some of the parking first and then doing the streetscape, because we understand that access is really important. Talked a little bit about this earlier. As you get further just west of City Hall, we've got a number of different businesses. We can imagine that the market may influence it, and some of the spaces that are around it could be either redeveloped or could be activated as outdoor spaces that would support some of the, perhaps reuse of some of the businesses that are nearby. Turning those into really fun spaces as well. So this is just a diagram. Now, the one thing that this particular graphic doesn't show is that there's a slope down, so some of the buildings may seem a lot taller than what they really appear. And another one looking just to the northwest. So right now, this area right here is shown as parking. Right now it is parking, but here we're showing as a small space for gathering. And that's just one of the things that downtown lacks right now. And so we'll also be showing a little bit on Central Park. When we get further east, just west of the highway and the entrance to it, it's making it much more pronounced than what it is today. It's easy to drive by it, and so having some things that are happening right near the intersection, and that can be done with some sort of gateway medians. We've got a number of different demonstrations inside the plan too, where you can have vertical elements and art. There's a number of trees that are in the banks, near the bank, that obstruct some of the view, and so as those age out, trying to keep some of that clear zone would be helpful. We just recognize that the market will change some of the single-family properties that are along Main Street, and some of them do have businesses. And seeing that as part of downtown, thinking about the setback of most of these buildings, parking is in the back, and you're framing the street, and so seeing that as something where that's where the parking is being more oriented to. There's also some open sites just on the south side. West of 8th Street, we are seeing some development already happening on 8th Street with some of the townhomes, but we could see this being a multifamily structure or even a possible hotel. But either way, it's just something with some mass. It's a lot of open area. While this is hotel, we're imagining it's probably more likely to be more apartments. I'm just realizing that this image wasn't swapped out from the open house. And then this is a view looking down Main Street. So it's more massing diagrams to just convey development form and not so much the streetscape, which I think is something that will need to be addressed eventually, particularly with Main, west of 10th. There's just a number of ADA issues, and so a number of communities are dealing with this, where they have to essentially replace everything from building face to building face. And if you're doing that, you've got a lot of different options and of how you can reassign what happens in that real estate. There's a conversation that's all over the place as far as wanting the desire to have more wider sidewalks, more furniture, more lighting, more street presence, but also a desire to keep all the existing parking that we have now. To jam the entire program into that space, we just don't have that. But to come to an agreement on it, it really requires meeting with individual property owners, businesses, to understand what do you want. And then understanding the parking demands too, that if you're able to get parking on the north and south side, perhaps that can offset some of the loss in parking that would happen. So everything from like larger bump outs near businesses to all parallel parking where you would have wider sidewalks, to switching up, having angled and parallel, to keeping the configuration that it is today, but creating more of a frame and stringing lights over it. Number of visual listening exercises made that string of lights a very popular piece. So that's a process in itself. To proceed with that, it's much better to have a dedication of funding before commissioning that project. And then we did a demonstration just for illustration for folks, and so talked about gateway features with medians and art, lighting, wider sidewalks, more planting. So there's just a number of different things that people conveyed that they wanted to see in their streetscape. But ultimately there was a strong interest in replacing it, but there's also a lot of concern how that would interrupt their business. We looked at facades too, and some of the improvements that could happen with that as well. And there can be some public-private partnerships in doing that. talking about the open spaces in downtown and places to gather, there's limited options, and so we really see that the Central Park being one of those options. The civic concept is what people tend to gravitate to, but even a project like this, it deserves its own process as well. When neighborhoods and residents become understanding that there's going to be a project happening and there's a commitment of funding, okay, then what's the schedule? What do we want in it? And also thinking about the demographics in the area as well. So that is about the conclusion of all the material that we shared at the open house with some updates. I've been very fortunate to work in a lot of communities that have seen a tremendous amount of transformation as a result of the downtown plan. And there's really two things that I've always found to be the most successful components. And there's way more. But the two is finding a champion. And it could just be one person. It could be a council member, it could be a mayor, it could be a business owner, it could be a staff member. But it's much better if you have a group of people. And the other thing is money and a commitment of funding. You can do some things that are in small budgets. A place like Kearney, Nebraska contributed just a simple $5,000 to putting planters at the end of their intersections. And then that manifested into a much larger project where they're doing a downtown park. And there's other communities that have tried to hit the home run and have really done really well. Park Rapids, a community of about 3,500 people, decided they're going to rebuild their entire streetscape. And they didn't imagine that they would have multiple phases, but it was so popular after they completed their first phase that they've had like 3 phases since and a ton of private redevelopment, private market reaction. So what special thanks to Kara and Mike and all the other staff members who helped us out. One of my favorite things about my job is building friendships all over the place and being able to tell the stories of the places that we worked with to help them understand what works and what doesn't. Take any questions.
Any questions from the council? Questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Do you have something else?
Nope, I'm just gonna get back to the agenda.
Okay, well, we're gonna go to the public. Anyone in the audience like to speak in support of? Support of. Opposition to. Opposition to. Opposition to.
I was supportive, sir.
Well, you missed it on that.
You're
one.
fast.
Opposition to.
I'll go sit down if you want.
You gotta be sworn in.
Yes.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do. I'm John Burke with Blue Springs Downtown Alive, a not-for-profit here in Blue Springs, focusing on the revitalization and economic development in our downtown. So I want to thank the city for taking the step to bring our consultants in and work with us on our master plan. You all know that it's been a few years since we've had a master plan in the downtown. Those of us in downtown, businesses in downtown, recognize that downtown is the heart of our city and a really important part of what drives economic development here in Blue Springs. So we're looking forward to the opportunity to work with the city staff on what the next steps are. We're excited about a master plan. We think this is the way of the future. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Any questions, Mr. Burke? Seeing none. Now we're gonna go to anybody that might be opposed to it. Opposition to. Opposition to. Close the public hearing. Who would make a motion to approve Resolution 22-2024 approving
I
the
will make
downtown
that
master
motion,
plan?
Your Honor.
You did?
I will make that motion.
Who wanna make a second?
I will second it.
All
Your
in
Honor, can
favor,
we
aye?
have a comment at this point?
I suppose.
I do appreciate that. It's been a while since we've had one of these before us. I know I watched the planning commission and they had a lot of questions about it. I thought this was well done. I thought we had a large number of people that participated in this. I have been involved in at least the last 2 of these, and this has been the best response we've had in years. But I would like to also emphasize that this document is a guide, hopefully for the future of downtown, And it's not necessarily written in a stone, but it's to give us some guides to go this direction. And as time changes, we have to change with that and do the best we can with it. I would also like to compliment our staff for what they have done to help this process, and also answer the questions for the people that came. They handled those meetings and the open houses very well. So compliments to staff for that. And that's my comments.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nate, for you. Well, I just want to echo that. Thank you, Kent. You said that eloquently. I'm excited about it. I think it's a great plan, and whatever we can do to get it going is great. I like to use the term template, but pattern, whatever, works really, really well. So thanks for those comments.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Yeah.
I just want to say that when we have businesses coming in to look at the downtown, one of the things that I've been asked here most recently is, I want to see a plan. I don't want to invest a lot of money if we don't have a plan. So this should carry us forward and give us more tools for more economic development in our downtown district. So I appreciate it.
Last week at Mr. Burke's Beckon and Call, I actually did a video about downtown. So I'm anxious to see how it turned out. Okay, all in favor, aye? I had a motion and a second, right? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Next, we have introduction and reading of bill number 5197.
I'll introduce, Your Honor.
Okay.
First reading of Bill 5197, an ordinance authorizing execution of a contract for legal services between the City of Blue Springs and the law firm of Jackson Lewis, P.C.
Your Honor, move the bill be approved on its first reading and proceed with the second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Second reading of Bill 5197, an ordinance authorizing execution of a contract for legal services between the City of Blue Springs and the law firm of Jackson Lewis, P.C.
Your Honor, move to approve the second reading and provide the proper ordinance number.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Councilmember Fowler,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Edmondson,
Aye.
Culpepper,
Aye.
Levesey,
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Carried unanimously and given ordinance number 5313.
Next, we have introduction and reading of bill number 5198.
I will introduce, Your Honor.
First reading of Bill 5198, an ordinance approving a contract between the City of Blue Springs and the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority for transit service to from Blue Springs to downtown Kansas City, Missouri.
Your Honor, move the bill be approved on its first reading and proceed with the second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Second reading of Bill 5198, an ordinance approving a contract between the City of Blue Springs and the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority for transit service to from Blue Springs to downtown Kansas City, Missouri.
Your Honor, move to approve the second reading, provide the proper ordinance number.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Councilmember Erickson,
Aye.
Edmondson,
Aye.
Culpepper,
Aye.
Levesey,
Aye.
Fowler,
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Carried unanimously and given ordinance number 5314.
Next, the moment we've all been waiting for. Ms. Karen Hughes is going to give us the presentation on fiscal year 2023 audit and tell us that we're gonna get about the 50th GFOA
All
award.
right.
All right.
But I'm sorry. Let me think. Do you know where I? Keep going. I think. Yep. Maybe that one. Let's see this full document.
Is that it, or does it keep going?
Yeah, we're looking for a PowerPoint. Sorry, it might be at the very end. You're gonna have to go a lot of pages. It might be the very last one. There we go. Okay.
Oh, I'm going too fast.
There you are.
All right, and we need to zoom in somehow. That's not it.
I think we can get that to work. I think that'll do. Does that work for y'all? All right, thank you. All right, well, thank you for letting me join this evening. It is the most exciting time of the year. I appreciate the intro. I'm here to go through the final 2023 audit report and the auditor communications that we do go through. So as usual, I'll go through a summary here in the PowerPoint presentation, which provides a summary of the documents that you've been provided copies with, and then happy to field any questions at the end. So the first items we're going to go through, as I mentioned, auditing standards do require the auditor to communicate back to those charged with governance on certain specific topics as it relates to the audit. So the first item you'll see noted there, we did issue an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements, meaning that they are presented in accordance with GAAP as required. The next item is to highlight if there was any new or significant changes in accounting standards that you'll see reflected in the documents. So the city adopted a couple of new accounting standards this year, GASB 91 for conduit debt. You already had disclosures on this, but this is for entities to have disclosures in their financials, specifically when they're in situations associated with private placement debt, basically. So when debt is issued, usually for economic development purposes, that there's just certain disclosures that are included in the financial statements on those topics. GASB 96, this is similar to the lease standard last year. Really, in summary, what this is it takes into consideration any long-term agreements that the city or any entity is part of, specific for software primarily, where you're adding just a liability that acknowledges there is a long-term agreement there, along with an offsetting asset because you have the right to use an asset as part of that agreement. The next item for management judgments and accounting estimates. As a reminder, there are certain areas in the financials that have a component of subjectivity, or management is preparing an estimate. Examples include things like the pension liability, depreciable lives of capital assets. So we do take a look at those as part of the audit and make sure that those estimates appear reasonable and are supported. Audit adjustments and uncorrected misstatements. So as a reminder, that's, we start with internal financials to start the audit process. What this is a reflection of is in the course of our testing, there were no material adjustments identified in the 2023 numbers that management then had to adjust in the financial statements. So that speaks a lot to the preparedness of the departments, specifically finance, especially in getting ready for the audit, that we're not identifying a lot of changes that are needed in the course of our testing. The next couple of items, certainly to emphasize the none there, this is just to make you aware that if we were encountering disagreements with management or having difficulties getting information and performing the audit, we are required to communicate that to you. So certainly want to point out here that no such instances were noted. Again, the group is very great to work with as far as responsiveness to our questions, preparedness for my team when they do start the audit process. Future accounting pronouncements, similar to what I mentioned on the earlier as far as adopted, the city discloses upcoming standards in the event that they could have a material impact on how things are accounted for going forward. So that's where you can see that information disclosed in the financial statements. And as was noted, the 2022 financials received the GFOA Certificate of Achievement, which again is a reflection of an additional review that is done on part of the GFOA. It requires additional items to be included in the aquifer, and it was determined that the 2022 report met those criteria to receive that certificate. As part of the audit, we did have one material weakness that we noted this year. It was for a restatement, really, as it related to how one of the funds was presented in the prior year report. So at a high level, the most quantitatively significant funds of the city are considered what's called major funds, and they're presented in the basic financial statements. This fund had increased activity last year as it was leading up to construction, and so it was not presented properly as a major fund, and that has been corrected in the 2023 report. The single audit, as a reminder, all entities that receive and expend more than $750,000 in federal grant expenditures are required to have a single audit performed in accordance with the financial statement audit. So we're taking a look at the federal grant dollars, again, on a selection basis. This year, the city had about $1.4 million in federal expenditures. And in the compliance report, you can see a page that details out each of the grants that are related to that. Specifically, we go through and select what's called a major program, or basically a sample of grants to audit. This year, the ARPA spending was selected one due to the significance. As you can see, it represents 64%, but the federal government has continued to identify this grant as what's considered a high-risk grant, just because of the newness, really, of it when it was originally rolled out. So that was the major program that we audited this year. There were no findings or question costs reported in our testing of the spending of those grant dollars. Next is a summary. So before I jump into this, as you know, the aquifer is a large document. To highlight a few things in there, at the start, you'll see the audit opinion that I referenced. You'll also see management's discussion analysis. I always point you all to that. That is a condensed, I'd say 10 to 15 page summary where management goes through and provides analysis similar to what I'm going to go through here, but it is a more condensed way to kind of go through and identify what were some of the significant maybe changes in 2023 compared to the prior year. And it's written in a narrative that's maybe a little more user-friendly to go through and get a condensed summary of that. But if you want to read the full document, certainly there is financial statements presented for every fund, balance sheet and income statement. There is detailed note disclosures that do go through required areas on your cash and investments, capital assets, debt, pension, the conduit debt, tax abatements, things like that. And then at the conclusion of the aquifer is the statistical section. So it's unaudited, but it's has a lot of long-term 10-year trend presentations on categories such as revenue collections, debt, general operational and economic statistics about the city. So here in summary, a general fund being the primary operating fund of the city, you can see here what revenue has looked like for the last 10 years. So in 2023 compared to the prior year, pretty consistent year over year. You'll see the general fund's revenue went up about 1.3 million or just under 5%. Most of that was in the tax base here. You can see on the top line, more specifically, I believe the majority of that was in sales taxes, both exceeding prior year and as well as exceeding what the budget had shown for fiscal year 23. Most of the other categories are pretty consistent. The other category, probably the noted change there was in investment income. So as a reminder, fiscal year 2022, the market did not perform as well. The general fund actually had a loss on investment earnings, and this year I believe it was back up to about 800,000. So that's where you'll see the increase in the other categories, investments being a big driver there. This summarizes expenditures by function, so the function being these 5 categories up here, excluding large capital outlay projects or debt service. So you'll see expenditures, again, moved very consistent with revenue, increased about 1.3 million, or 4%, I believe. And each of these categories you'll really see are very consistent year over year as far as the spending. And again, the financials, just so you know, the general fund is required to include a budget to actual presentation. So in the aquifer, you'll also see a budget to actual, and that MD&A that I mentioned also includes commentary on areas where the budget was met or exceeded or under, and some narratives as to why. Fund balance by general fund. So fund balance, again, is the terminology for the equity in the general fund. These are the 5 required categories. Non-spendable just simply represents areas that are, for example, this primarily is advances to other funds. So those funds are already really kind of earmarked for what they're used for. Committed, as a reminder for you all, the committed by definition is items that council has designated. So more specifically, it's the budget stabilization reserve and the emergency reserve policies that you've adopted. And there is a detailed description in the report of what those policies are, what has to happen for those funds to be spent. Assigned is areas that are designated primarily by departments. So specifically in the general fund, the majority of this is capital projects that have been designated by departments for subsequent years. And then the unassigned category represents funds available for discretionary spending in the following years. Legal debt margin, this is just to show a summary again, the legal debt margin based on property tax assessment value. And you can see here the assessed value compared to what the debt limit is, and then much lower is where your bonded debt currently sits. So you can see you have a substantial legal debt margin available. Operating results in the enterprise fund. So again, this will be those that water, field house, et cetera, that operate more on what's considered a business type perspective, because rates are set with the intent to cover the operating expenses to provide those services. So you can see consistently the green bar operating revenues have continued to increase each year as expected, with planned rate increases, usage, et cetera, and have continued to exceed the last few years the operating expenses, which again is a way to monitor, are the rates at an appropriate amount to cover the cost to provide those services. Any questions? As always, I know that's high level, but I'm happy to go through any questions on any of the slides or any of the reports that you've received.
Councilmember Fowler.
Yeah, maybe comments. On that far right, looks like you're on page 333. Could you go to like 291, I think it is?
Let's see, can I see the page number? Sorry.
On far right, and then down just a little bit, where it says 332 now.
Okay, I'm not seeing the page number. So this is
Oh.
where you wanted though?
Yeah, 291,
Oh,
page,
okay.
Adobe,
Sorry.
I think it's Adobe page 291.
I know. Let's see. I'm just gonna go back and we'll see if we can get close. I think you're in the stats section. Okay. Sorry, just bear
Yep,
with me.
right about, oh yeah, 29, okay, just up a little bit more. Page
more?
page 115 right there, I think it is.
Okay.
And then, can you bring that top chart into focus a little bit more? Yeah. This is, I guess, I want to highlight that, hey, if you pay $100 in groceries 2 years ago, you pay sales tax on that. Well, today, if you go, so same groceries are $120, you know, you're going to be paying more tax because of inflation. And tax revenue is up. But I guess I want to talk about the percentage of our, per assessed $100 of evaluation you pay on property taxes. And you can see the years, this is a 10-year view, and there in the third column from the year is the total direct from the city of Blue Springs. And you can see over that 10-year period, it's gone from around 75 cents down to 63 cents. I also tip the hat to Metropolitan Junior College because they have reduced as well. Among our peer other taxing entities, the city of Blue Springs is well ahead. And you know, I guess with Mayor Ross retiring here, good time to highlight his leadership in bringing down the tax percentages for all the citizens of Blue Springs. So I like to see that. I always go to that page first to take a look at it, and it's definitely heading the right direction in my opinion. Thank you, Your Honor.
Working with a great council and staff.
Well, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes. Any other comments, questions of Ms. Hughes? Well, you did a good
Thank
job.
you as always.
Your Honor, I would like to just chime in too. I want to say congratulations to Karen. She's got, I know, a great staff, but under her direction, this has come out a clean report again. So I appreciate all her efforts and her staff. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And my
Second.
question to our city administrator, how many of them GOFOAs we got? We're up to what, about 30 or 40? Consecutive.
1982 is when we got the first
1982 is when we got the first, and every year thereafter. That's saying something.
Well, that's Mayor Ross, that's when you became an alderman, wasn't it? Like 1980?
1981, that's when I became an alderman.
Okay.
Yes.
Good correlation there.
Yes. Okay, next we have visitors. First one is Ron Bond. Have 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. My name is Ron Bond. I live here in Blue Springs, and I didn't know the procedure because I hadn't been to that many city council meetings, but I want to comment on Google. Little background, I ran the engineering firm when they very first came to Kansas City. I was the president of that company. I worked with them to do all the engineering design, and it isn't quite as smooth as what she put on, as you pointed out, Mr. Mayor. I would recommend, and I think Mr. Levesey mentioned it, that you escrow funds for the cleanup, and then at the end of each, and they call them nodes, but it's areas, that you have a city employee ride through with them and ride off on it, then you can release those funds back to them, not as a punitive thing, but to make sure it gets done. In the last 3 years in my house, I've had Kansas City Power and Light, AT&T, and Comcast all come through my yard. And none of them cleaned it up correctly. Without being the squeaky wheel, it would not have gotten cleaned up. As far as her saying it can't go in the rear property line, now the legalities of it, I don't know. She might be correct on that. But our company owned over 50 boring machines, and they can bore from the end of the street all the way through that property line without tearing anything up, unless they hit something, but if they do it correctly and pull it back. And in my case, it could not go, if they put it in front, I could never have them. It'll never come into my house because I've got a reverse story and a half with a steep lot. The only way to get into it's on the rear. That's where most people's entrance to their utilities are. They would have to bore or trench. What they do is all the way down around my house where they come back. It'd be over 150 feet to get into my house. So it's going to be inconvenience for the residents if they put it in out front. I thought about using AT&T, but I don't want to tear up my yard again. Anyway, that's about all I had to say. So it'll be good. I'm for Google. I think it'll be good for the competitive, and everybody else's prices will be affected by it in a good way. But the cleanup and the process will, no matter, and I think that Google's probably got better at it. But I think it'll be a process for you, and I think you all will be hearing some complaints. It's just the way you handle them. The escrow thing, I think, is a great idea.
We appreciate your comments, and
Your Honor,
certainly staff will
my-
duly note your comments.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. My understanding is we cannot do that with
With the escrow.
we
Right.
can't do
Oh,
that.
well, I
So
don't know.
It's a great
that.
idea.
Find some way to make sure that they get it done. You know, the squeaky wheel gets greased, even if it's somebody from the city going out after the project's done, and if something's not right, bringing it to their attention, make sure they take care of it. Yeah.
I think the point he makes about the supervision, kind of keeping an eye on them.
That's
is
right.
a good idea.
Because they'll have 50 contractors in here. Most of them, they don't even know because they change all the time. And not to be unpolitically correct, but when I go out to talk to them, none of them spoke English. So I'd have to get the name off their truck. I'd have to call and I'd have to complain until they finally send somebody out to I'm talking about the AT&T project that was just completed. My neighbor's yard is still messed up. It's just because he doesn't care. But it looks horrible when you drive down the street. Got a mound of dirt in his yard, which should be cleaned up. Oh, and then the other thing is require them. Some people have sod, like my neighbor Dave Haskins. He's got zoysia sod. Well, they threw just some cheap seed down there. It looked horrible, and I literally called them and complained enough till they finally provided sod. But they should provide that in certain cases.
Well, thank you, Ron.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
All right.
Good luck. Congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, James Mullen. James Mullen here? Guess not. Martin, I'm looking for you. Is Martin here? Got first name Martin. Oh, it's on the back. Underwood. Martin Underwood?
Mayor, I think those two speakers were informed that that item was continued tonight and probably
That's why
didn't
they
come
didn't
because of
show
that,
up.
yes.
Wise decision on their part. Ken Harrell. Ken, you got something you want to tell us?
Thank you. I almost hesitate to take your time up to once again talk about the backyard chicken controversy that is throughout the city. And I do kind of apologize for that because there's been so much discussion about that. But I also feel like that there hasn't been a real opportunity for people who are opposed to the backyard chickens to present any facts before you. So this is the best way I could come up with to just bring a couple of points. First of which is, you know, those of us who are protected, well, in my case not, but by a homeowners association, if you happen to live in a subdivision where there's a homeowners association, most likely you're protected against your neighbors having farm animals, backyard chickens, ducks, you know, goats, whatever. But what about the people who aren't? What about the subdivisions who don't have HOAs? What protection do they have other than whatever ordinance gets presented, assuming an ordinance does get presented, unlike what happened at the last meeting? But what protection do they have? Probably not a lot. And That really falls upon the decisions you all make about backyard chickens. The other thing I would say is, to sort of paint the picture on the opposition. So I'm sitting in my backyard, right? I want to have the grandkids over to play. I want to be barbecuing. I want to do whatever it is we all do in our backyards. 10 feet away from my fence, no barriers, minimal fencing. I've got chicken coops and everything that goes along with that. That doesn't paint a very pretty picture. Property values, you put your house up for sale, prospective buyer comes in to look at your house. How attractive you think that's going to be to a prospective buyer to have chicken coops and, again, all that goes along with that right next door. Personally, I don't think it'll be very attractive. Investments in our properties, pools, patios, all the backyard hoo-ha that all of us are, so happy to have in our backyards. It's not going to encourage people to improve their property. In fact, it's going to be just the exact opposite. Why would you improve your property when that's what you have to deal with next door? So in my last 20 seconds here, I just wanted to take the opportunity to get before you and put some of those issues in your mind to think about, because obviously this issue isn't going to go away. In some way, fashion, or another will most likely have to be dealt with. And I strongly support not allowing farm animals, chickens, fowls, ducks, the precedent that would set in our city. And for that, I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. That brings us to mayoral announcements. Tonight's mayoral thoughts to ponder comes from M. Burr, and I quote, "I do not want someone who stands next to me because they are lonely. I want someone who stands next to me because they can't imagine standing next to anyone else." End quote. That being said, let's have a motion from our city clerk that someone can so move.
Mayor, a motion is in order for council to go into closed session pursuant to section 610.021 subparagraph 3 revised statutes of Missouri for the purpose of privileged communications between a governmental body or its representative and legal counsel, including personnel, and that any minutes, documents, and other records discussed or taken during the closed session remain closed, and that this body stand adjourned at the completion of such session.
So moved, Your Honor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edmondson.
Aye.
Culpepper.
Aye.
Levacy.
Aye.
Fowler.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Carried unanimously.
We're going to go into closed session.